Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to the Muslim Network, a channel dedicated to growing the wealth of the Ummah through Islamically compliant businesses. Today's installment of Islamic Finance Fundamentals series is about contracts of transferring debt from one person to another, known as a Hawalah. This is one of the 5 financial contracts that I will be covering during this series. The information for this video has come from the Accounting and Auditing Organization for Islamic Financial Institutions. According to their website, they are an Islamic international autonomous not-for-profit corporate body that prepares accounting, auditing, governance, ethics, Sharia standards for Islamic financial institutions and the industry. Many Islamic countries use them as a base for their financial ruling. So what is a Hawalah? It is a financial mechanism where debt is transferred from the original debtor, known as the muhil, to a third party known as a muhal alayhi, who agrees to pay on their behalf. This is different from a transfer of rights where one creditor is replaced by another. The contract is useful because it allows for the recovery of debt if someone cannot repay, or they do not have the funds as they are owed money themselves, so a cash flow issue. This contract is recommended if the potential payer is solvent and reliable. If the credit worthiness is unknown, then it is known as muhab, or permissible. This contract cannot be forced onto someone. It must have the consent of all 3 parties for it to be valid. Effect immediately, but payments can be delayed, and as such the payer cannot ask for payments ahead of due payments. The contract cannot be terminated unilaterally. So this is something I'm noticing a lot. There's a lot of making sure everyone involved has consented to something happening in Islamic finance, which is great to hear. There are 2 types of Hawalah: restricted and unrestricted. In a restricted Hawalah, the payer is specified and the payment is to be made using the assets from the transferor that the payer holds. So say if you're a merchant, you sell someone some products but they are holding back the payment for whatever reason. This is common practice actually even today in terms of helping with cash flows. So what the merchant can do, they owe someone else money, so what they will do is say, look, get your money from this guy, he owes me this much, and it should cover the amount that we've transferred in the Hawalah. It just cuts out the middleman, one extra step, and it makes it more streamlined, essentially. The other one is unrestricted Hawalah. The payer does not owe the transferor anything but agrees to pay the creditor on behalf of the debtor. The payer can then seek recourse from the transferor after the payment. So I have a friend that is willing to pay my debt on my behalf, so we conduct a Hawalah. They pay off the debt because the money is urgent for the creditor, let's say. Then after that, my friend can ask money back from me, and they have that right. Whereas in a restricted Hawalah, that is not the case, because they are using my assets. The AAOIFI specify that the conditions of a Hawalah are as follows. It requires consent from all the parties involved. The transferor must owe debt to the payer. All parties must be legally competent, so they need to know what's happening. We can't take advantage of people. It's very important, and I think that's very important in our current law system. My brother's a lawyer, and he says that everyone needs to be competent. So if someone's inhibited by either drugs or alcohol, the contract is void because they're not present there. But this also means everyone must know the legal implications of creating this contract. The transfer debt must be clear and transferable, and the payment should be completed in terms of kind, type, quality, and amount. So this is actually just stating that we need to make sure every single detail is clear. This avoids any future complications. It makes it simpler, it just makes things clear so everyone's in the know. And it actually reminds me of a verse in the Quran. I can't remember the exact verse, but I know it's in Surah Al-Baqarah. It's saying that you should write down everything pertaining to debt, even if it's a small amount or a large amount. Get it in writing. It prevents future issues, because it's in writing. You don't have to depend on memory. And another key thing about Hawalah is that another condition of the Hawalah is that I can transfer part of my debt to someone else. So if I own £1 million, to a creditor, I can transfer 900,000 to someone else, and I'll deal with the 100,000 myself. So just to make sure our terms are clear, we have the creditor, they had the money and they loaned it to someone. You have the transferor, the person that received the money from the creditor and is now paying back, but they transfer that debt to the payer, the person that will be paying on behalf of the transferor. Just to make those clear. So there are scenarios where the creditor has the right to go after the transferor. In the event of a payer's death or bankruptcy, they can no longer pay it, so they can go after the transferor for the money again. The contract requires everyone's consent. If the payer denies the contract, there is no transfer of debt. The payer's institution goes bankrupt. So if you're transferring it to an institution and they go bankrupt, they can't pay it, so then the creditor has recourse against the transferor. Okay. So as we know, our lives are not guaranteed to us. We may not wake up tomorrow, and who knows how long our prosperity will last. We may be rich right now, but the next day we might even be dead, or we just have no money. That's the way it happens. So it's important to take that into account and handle that. And this is what the AAOIFI have taken into consideration. So the impact of death or liquidation is as follows. The transferor's death or liquidation does not cancel the contract, but the amount involved in the Hawalah is excluded from the estate distribution. The transferee's heirs will inherit their Hawalah rights. So if the transferor dies, the heirs will inherit the rights, which means that the payer will still pay, but the creditor still has recourse against the transferor's kids, or heirs I should say. If the payer dies, the transferee can seek repayment from the payer's assets. So if they pass, they can take that money from a payer's assets that they will distribute amongst their family or their heirs. So when is the Hawalah terminated? So there are 3 scenarios. When the debt has been paid off, then it's done. Or all 3 parties mutually agree to terminate the contract. Or the payee has the right to write off the debt, so they won't go back to the transferor and ask for the money, but they may still need to pay the creditor if the debt's not settled. It just means that the Hawalah is done, but the payment between the creditor and the payer is still there. You may think that this is not very common, but we use it a lot in our day-to-day lives. So an example of a modern day application of a Hawalah is a current account withdrawal. So if the check is used to pay off a debt, we are transferring that debt to the institution of the bank, and they will pay it off on our behalf, but they would then have the recourse to take that money from our bank account. You know, you don't think about it, but this is how it would work. Overdrafts are another example of this. Issuing a check against an account without a balance can be considered an unrestricted transfer of debt if the bank accepts the overdraft. Travelers' checks, bills of exchange, endorsement of negotiable instruments, and money transfers. These are all other examples of Hawalah in principle. Just a bit of an aside here. I remember reading a book about Islamic finance, and one of the things that the banks would do, they would understand someone is struggling to pay back a debt they had to the bank. Although there's no interest on it, back in the day that is, they would see that they might not be able to make the payments, so they would say to the person, would you want to transfer this debt to another person that might be more wealthy and will have more time to pay it off and make it easier? It'll be easier for them. Okay, so before I end off this video, I've linked the link to the actual document that I used to find the information for this video in the description, along with the Discord for the Muslim network. So be sure to click on the link and join and get to know the other Muslims of the Muslim network, and be sure to communicate with each other. The other thing I wanted to mention was that as I was reading the translation of the Quran, there was a point where it states in Surah Al-Baqarah again, because that's where I am, it's good to spend your money for the approval of Allah. And I think a lot of Muslims try to shy away from wealth, but I think it's really important to know that as long as your money is being put to good use, i.e. donating to charities, setting up charities, helping those in need, whether it's through a charity or just in person, or lending money to your family, or paying things for your family, or people you don't even know, but people that need it, these are considered good things in the eyes of Allah, and something we should all strive to do, whether we have lots of funds or not. Again, I believe money is better in the hands of good Muslims than in those that don't share our morals. So keep that in mind, inshallah, and assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.